Okay, so I guess good morning and good evening, everyone. Thank you all for attending, taking times out of your day, busy work schedule to be with us today. Today we are joined by two staff members from the Troy University Center for National Programs. First, we're joined by Claire Humphreys. She is actually an international recruiter at Troy University and received her bachelor's degree from Troy in psychology in 2018. She's lived in various places across the world, Central America, Southeast Asia, and East Asia, and has worked for nonprofits and teaching English as a second language. And it's come to my attention that she's actually been to Kazakhstan as part of, I guess, recruiting efforts for Troy University. And she also recruits students from Africa, Asia, and Oceania to Troy. So thank you very much for being here, Claire. Last but not least, we have Jamie Sessions. She is an international student advisor and a history instructor at Troy University. She received her bachelor's degree in history from Troy University in 2015 and went on to earn her master's in history from the University of Mississippi in 2017. As international student advisor, she advises students on maintaining their immigration status and adjusting to life in the U.S. So we have two unique perspectives here with us today. One who deals with a lot of incoming prospective international students, and another person who deals with a lot of the current and some incoming exchange students as well. And they took time out of their day to be with us and answer any questions that we may have. I've come up with a list of common questions, I guess, to ask them and kind of facilitate the panel. And if you have any questions during the panel, please feel free to enter them into the chat. And at the end of the panel, I'll give some time for just a Q&A session, so you can save them and ask the questions there as well. So with that said, let's begin. So my first question is starting off kind of with immigration, like your immigration documents. So can you explain, what is the I-20?
So the I-20.
If ever Claire or Jamie, feel free to answer.
So the I-20 is the document that is issued to you once a university admits you into their program, whichever program you applied for. This will be the document that you will take to your visa interview to get your F1 visa. And once you're in the US, it becomes the most important document you have with you. That will be what determines you being in status, etc.
No, you need to travel with it as well.
Right.
So not only do you need to take it to your visa interview, you actually have to enter the country with it. So if you don't have that with you in your possession, so not just in your checked luggage, but in your carry-on luggage. Right. So with you when you walk across the border after you get off your flight, if you don't have that with you, they won't let you enter the country. So it's very important to take it with you to your visa interview, as well as to have it in your possession. I know a lot of students have it in a little folder with them in their backpack as they go across, as they travel. So that way they can easily pull it out of their backpack when they're filling out their immigration papers. When they're you'll typically, when you fly, they'll give you a little form on the flight, or now a lot of it's electronic. You'll go through typically, I know a lot of students that come to Troy will go through Atlanta, which is a major airport in the eastern part of the United States, and there's electronic little stations that you fill out your visa information, and you have to have your I-20 there, as well as when you go through Customs and Border Patrol. And if you don't have that, they're going to send you back to Kazakhstan. So it's really important not only to have it for your visa interview, but when you travel as well.
Right.
Yeah, great. And would you say not just having a copy of the I-20, but having the original copy? Should they have the original with them at all times when they're traveling and stuff like that?
Right now, due to COVID, electronic copies are acceptable. That said, I always say if you can get the original, that's probably best practice.
Yeah, so because of COVID, we can email you, depending on your school. A lot of schools are able to email them. Some schools are still doing hard copies, but because of COVID, SEVIS has allowed most schools to email electronic documents. However, we don't know when that will end. We don't know when things will change. And so you do have to have some form of hard copy. So whenever you have them emailed to you, you have to have them printed off. It has to be a good copy of your printed off documents. You can't have it like I made a copy of the questions that Mac is asking and it's all ratty and looks really bad and it's not really good clear copy. You have to have it a clear copy on colored, colored ink. So it has to be a legitimate copy. It can't be poorly copied. And that has to go with you to your visa interview and through customs. It can't be on your iPhone or iPad.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, very, very good information, Claire and Jamie. And you mentioned, I guess, talking about so does the university issue the I-20?
Yes. So once you're admitted, a DSO at the university working in the admissions department will create the I-20 and issue it to you.
Great. And do you know, I guess, is there a time that they can expect to receive the I-20, after they are admitted, or is that just kind of up to the university? How quickly they work?
So typically, the admission process normally is 7 to 14 days for graduate students. But depending on your university, I would go to the admission page on your university and they normally have it listed. And I would say if you provided all your documents, if you haven't provided your financial document, which is key, if you don't have a financial document and you don't have a valid passport, they cannot issue you, they legally, per the United States government, cannot issue you an I-20. They can offer you admission because admission is not based on your finances and it's not based on your passport. They can offer you admission, but they cannot legally grant you an I-20. So if you don't provide those if you don't provide your financial statement, if your financial statement is not in your name, if you don't provide a sponsor letter, which would be whoever's sponsoring you, whoever that financial document's name is in, would be your sponsor. So you would have to have a letter from your sponsor and a valid passport. And by valid, that means it cannot expire within 6 months of the date you're traveling. So if you don't provide those things, they cannot issue you an I-20. So that would elongate that process.
Yep. So very, very good information. And you mentioned the visa interview. So what documents should they bring to their visa interview?
Very good question. And I actually have a link that I'll put in the chat after I answer that, because there's a myriad of things that students have to bring, but your I-20 is important. You also have to bring the receipt for your I-901 fee. So once you get your I-20, you'll have to pay your I-901 fee, which is also known as your SEVIS fee, and you'll have to bring a copy of that receipt. If you don't have that receipt, that's grounds for automatic denial, unfortunately, and they just want to make sure that you paid it, because some people will get through the whole visa process and not even have paid their I-901 fee, and that's an important fee to pay, because that is basically your right to have a visa, right? So then you also have to have a copy of your DS-160 form, not the whole form, just the front page of it. And so you have to have a copy of that, as well as a copy of your passport, your financial documents. So whatever you provided to the school, as long as it's still up to date. Now, if you've gone through the whole admission process and you provided forms to your school and they have to be within 6 months of expiration, right? They cannot be over 6 months. So by the time you get to your visa office interview, if they've expired, you need to bring an updated copy to your visa interview. You also need to bring all of your academic history documents. They might not look at it. Your visa interview is probably going to be no more than 5 minutes. But if you don't have those things and they happen to ask for it, again, unfortunately, they might deny you, because it's not anything to stress out about. You should be really relaxed when you go in there, but understand that they automatically assume that you have no right to have a visa until you prove to them that you have the right to have a visa. So you need to have all of these things with you when you go, because you need to prove to them that you have the right to have a visa. You also need to have an understanding of what they're going to ask you. So there's a myriad of questions that they can ask you, anything to why you want to go to the United States, what program you're going to study, why you've chosen that school, what's your intent when you get home. Because keep in mind, a visa to go to study in the United States, a student visa, is a non-immigrant visa. So you're not going to come here and live and become a US citizen, not under a student visa, because at this time, student visas are non-immigrant visa. Eventually, they may become dual intent visas, but they're not at this time. So if you go into a visa office and you say, I really want to become a United States citizen, you've applied for the wrong visa and they will deny you. So you have to be prepared with the list of questions that they might ask you, and be able to answer those and not answer them with rote kind of answers, but be very genuine and answer those accurately, and don't lie. Because if you lie about anything, unfortunately, the United States government, for some reason, they know a lot of stuff, and so they can find out. So if you have family in the United States and you lie about it, they find out. So I'll put that link in the box. It gives every information that you need about a student visa and applying for a student visa. I'll also put a link in there for paying your I-901 fee. So I'll put that in there. Okay.
Yeah. Do you have anything to add to that, Jamie?
No, just
Or she kind of answered all.
Yeah, she went. But, you know, to hammer in, it is a non-immigrant visa. So if you go in there saying, I'm wanting to immigrate to the U.S., my goal is to go to school and then get a job and stay in the U.S., that's going to get you denied. The point of this visa is you come, you get a degree, and you go home. So you can change your mind once you're here, but during that visa interview, you have to emphasize, I'm going to get my degree, I'm going back home once that's complete.
And really, if you could drive home, like if you really can explain to them that my purpose is to study in the United States and I have XYZ plan to get my degree and then return home and better my country with this degree, that really kind of explains to them why you need the degree in the United States to come back and have the intentions to return home for XYZ reason, right? I mean, I can't give you the answers, right? But like, if you have intent to return home for some greater purpose, that's really what they're looking for.
Great, yeah, because I just wanted to add, I would think a lot of students that are wanting to study in America would go in it and talk about how they want to continue to stay in America. So that's very helpful information to know about the visa interview. And just hearing, all these like I-20, all these different fees, the visa interview process, there's a lot of documents. And especially, if you take into consideration, like the statement of purpose, recommendation letters, all that we've been discussing in previous presentations. So where I'm getting at with this is you need to kind of allocate, a little bit of time to make sure you, for applying and make sure you get all this information in. So do you have an opinion on when is a good time for how much time should students allocate when they're applying for universities to make sure they get everything in on time?
Well, legally, the school that you're applying to can't issue your I-20 until a year before your program start date. Like, we can't go into CVIS, the system that we issue I-20s through, and issue an I-20 more than a year before your program start date. So if you apply for a program that starts in August 2022, I can't issue you, or well, Jamie, she's a DSO, right? So she can't issue you an I-20 until August 12th, 2021. So you can apply, but you're going to be waiting for that I-20. You might receive your admission letter, but you're going to be waiting for that I-20 until 1 year before your program start date, because legally we can't issue you that. So you can apply as long as you have all that stuff. But if that means that your financial statement that you've submitted or anything like that expires, if you have a TOEFL or an IELTS, those are only good for 2 years. So if any of that expires, you're going to have to resubmit all of that. And then applying for a visa, you can only apply for a visa interview. You can set the appointment way in advance, but you can only start attending your visa interview 120 days before your start date. So if you get your I-20 1 year in advance before your program start date, you would have to count back, which Google is really beneficial, right? You can type in 120 days before August 12th, 2022, and it will tell you. You can only schedule your visa interview 120 days before your program start date. If you go before then, they're going to deny you because you can't have it before then. And you can't enter the country more than 30 days before your program start date. So you can start the process before then, but there is stipulations for the US government of when you can get your I-20, when you can schedule your visa interview, and when you can enter the country.
And one piece of advice I always give my exchange students coming in is keep an eye on how the available visa interviews are in your country, because different countries have different demands on students coming to the US. So it may be that you can get a visa interview very easily and quickly and get that scheduled. So you might not have to think about it until, 100 days before your start date. But other countries, it's very, very backed up and the wait time is really long. So if you're wanting to come in August, you should probably start thinking about going ahead and scheduling and reserving your spot much earlier.
And there is also a link to check the visa wait times in your country. I think you've been putting links in there for me, so that's awesome. I can put that link there too, but you can check the link in your for your embassy. I know like the Nigerian one, I work in Africa, right? And so the Nigeria embassy in Lagos is 999 days because they can't go out any further than that because it's so backed up. So I'm not sure what it is in Kazakhstan. And so you might want to check to see how far backed up it is. And because of COVID, they do have limitations on how many people they can see in the embassy at one time because of social distancing reasons. And so I know that they are limited on how many people they can see. So you want to check to see what the availability and what the wait time is in your country.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, very, very good. So what should they do, if the embassy is closed in their country currently? Is there, do you have an opinion on what they should do then?
I think communication with their university is key in that situation. I have students, that's what they're running into. One option is to defer your start date. So if you can't get the visa interview, they're closed, you can talk to admissions at your university and say, I can't get the interview. Can you please push my start date? Maybe if you're going in the fall, to spring semester.
You always have the option if your start date is coming up, you can always contact your embassy and request an emergency visa interview because you're a student and your start date is coming up. They do have the option to deny that, but that is always a possibility. I mean, if you're scheduling it now and your start date is in August, that's not an emergency, right? But you can try that. That's an option. And now because of COVID, it's lessening in a lot of countries, even though in a lot of countries it is worsening. Again, pay attention to your country. I know a lot of regions are opening up closer to the end of May. And so sometimes you want to wait and just see what is opening before you start the deferral process. And then always online classes is a possibility. You can start online and then transfer to on campus once a visa interview starts, is open, maybe in spring. Those are always possibilities. So your campus, wherever you decide to go, your university, wherever you decide to go, wants to make something work for you because they want you to continue your education process as much as you do, right? Like we want to help you reach your educational goals. We don't want you just to be stuck, right? So we want to help you. There's just the limitation of you getting your visa. And so if you want to start sooner than later, online classes is always a possibility because you don't need a visa for that. And then once you're able to get your visa at the next semester, you can transfer to on campus.
And I also see, you commented that a student scheduled an interview for August 18th, but they'll be able to reschedule and request urgent interview. And yeah, that's an important note to make. I have students, you may get an interview and say, well, my interview is not going to be until September, and that's past my start date. What can I do? refresh the website constantly. A student did that, and her interview was September, which was too late. But she booked it. She kept checking, and she was able to get one that's only 5 days from now. So it ended up working. And then you can cancel that later interview.
Yeah, you can reschedule up to 3 times without penalty.
Right.
Yeah, and they mentioned some very important information that I've harped on in my previous presentations, is reaching out to the university's admissions. I don't know, in every single my presentation I've talked about, reaching out to the international admissions counselors or recruiters at their specific university, and they can help you through the process. Because the majority of staff members who work in higher education, they're there to help you. I mean, the working student services, they're there to help you. They want to help you, and will do everything in their power to help you. And I see that every day with these two.
And the sooner you reach out, the more we can do. If you wait until, the day before you need something, it's very difficult. There's, different time zones, things like that. So even though we want to help you, it might not be possible. But if you reach out from the start when you know you're having an issue, then we can work with you more and help you more.
Yeah, I would just say though, when it comes to the visa process, there are certain things that we can do from the university side, but there is certain things that we are limited with the visa process, because legally we can't go to the visa process. We can't go through the visa process with you, because I am not an international student, right? So I can show you how to do it in your school, whatever school you're applying to. We have fact pages, we have examples to walk you through step by step. I know probably 95% of the schools that are out there, unless they're bad schools, right, will have some sort of webinar, some sort of fact page, some sort of links, whatever it might be, will have a way to help you understand the visa process, because we literally cannot go there to help you. We cannot call up the embassies. I can't. I wish I could. When I'm in country, I go talk to the visa officers, but I can't discuss case by case with them, because they're legally bound, I'm legally bound. There's rules that we have per university for students' protection. They're bound by rules, by law for the United States for student protection. And so we can't discuss cases with them. I can't call up and be like, I need to talk about Mac because he needs to get into university. I can't do that. And I would love to do that so much, but I can't. So it's so much that I can do to help you as a student, to equip you, but because it's for your personal visa, it's something you're going to have to do. So that's what Jamie's saying, is you have to have ample enough time. So if you wait till last minute, I'm limited in how much I can do to help you.
Yeah, it's so very good. So reaching out early, that's pretty much reaching out to y'all early is what they need to take away from it.
And then if you have to reach out to the embassy too, because they want to help you.
Very good. And I guess to go back, I guess what we talked about with getting the I-20, you mentioned like financial statement. Can you kind of go over kind of what is like the financial statement, or what information is like a bank statement or anything like that?
Yes, Jamie will answer and then I'll chime in.
So your financial statement is typically a bank statement. It has to be funds that are readily available. So it can't be something that you've got to go through a process. It can't be stock market funds. So like, okay, you've got this set to the side, but you can't access it. It has to be funds readily available. And different universities have different requirements for what the financial statement can be within what's allowed by the U.S. government. Typically, though, a bank statement is the best one to use.
Yeah, very good. And would you say, do all universities have a different amount that they require? Okay, and where they would find that information?
Yeah, so from an admissions point of view, you need to go onto the admissions site. So if you're applying as a graduate student, go onto the graduate page. If you're applying as an undergraduate student, go under your undergraduate admissions. It will tell you what's required, because essentially it's the first year of fees for tuition, housing, food, insurance, everything for 1 year. So enough to prove to the United States that you can live and eat, go to school for 1 year in the United States. So for example, for Troy University, for a graduate student, it's $27,500. That includes housing, food, tuition, insurance, everything, 1 year. That's not your total cost to come to the university. That's 1 year. That's all the United States government wants to see.
In the cost of living, so a lot of the fees you'll see that you're covering is an average of the area. So you could get, say you came to Troy, you might find you want a really nice apartment and that's a lot more expensive. We give kind of an average of what the cost of living here is for a student. And again, different universities have different tuitions. The cost of living in somewhere like New York or California is much higher than Alabama. So those are all things to consider when you're applying. Look at the state you're going to be living in and how expensive it is to live there.
Yeah, that's very good advice, Jamie. Because one of the questions I had was, besides the tuition, what other costs should international students be aware of? Like fees for your classes, cost of living, so rent, food, and insurance,
books,
right?
So that amount does not include any indirect costs. It only is included in direct costs accrued with the school. So books, if you have to get a computer, if you have to get a car, any of that is not included. As well as if you decide to go on a trip, if you want to hang out with friends, I mean, any of that is not included. If you have hospital bills that you end up having to pay, none of that is included. And books in the United States, unfortunately, can be very expensive.
Right. And also keep in mind with this proving your financial statement, it may look like, well, the university just wants me to show I have all this money and they're concerned about money. It's really the university and the US government wanting to make sure that you are okay when you're in the US, that you can pay your tuition, your education won't be hindered, but also you'll have a safe place to live and food to eat. All of that is to look after you. So a lot of students look at it as a negative, but I view it as a positive. We're making sure you'll be okay when you're here.
Yeah, exactly. And as like Jamie and I, and even Claire, we see students sometimes that don't have those funds, and that's really if it makes it a difficult situation to study.
It's very hard because universities are limited on how they can help students financially, especially beyond academic scholarships and things like that.
Okay. Yeah. I guess, and it's kind of, so we have very, very good information for everyone to take away. One of, I guess to kind of backtrack to like the admissions process, I've been kind of jumping around the questions, but so is English proficiency required for admissions? If so, what tests are most commonly accepted?
So it depends on your school, and this is why it's really important to do the research on what school you want to go to. And I know that could be a question later on down the line, so I won't get off on a tangent on that. But when it comes to English proficiency, typical tests are like IELTS, TOEFL. If you're coming in undergraduate, SAT, ACT, not on the graduate level. So IELTS or TOEFL. Some schools now accept Duolingo, not all. So it's really important to go onto your school's admission page and see what they accept. And so I know now because of COVID, some are doing online tests because some testing centers are closed. Again, go online to that page to see what they will accept, because not all will accept those online tests. It's really, really important that you do your research, especially as graduate students. You should get in the habit of doing research, because that's what your graduate studies will be about, is doing research. So if your school does not require it, they will probably test you on arrival. And if you don't test well, they'll put you in an English as a second language program. However, if they require it, it's because they don't have an English as a second language program. And if they require it, it's a non-conditional requirement, meaning you have to have it to get admissions, because there's no way that they're going to test you. There's no ESL program. It is something that they have to have for admissions. Additionally, it looks very good on your visa interview to have that. If you have English proficiency, bring your test results with you to your visa interview, because they're going to look at that as well. It's also going to be reflected on your I-20 if you have English proficiency. If you don't, I know, for example, at Troy, if you don't have English proficiency, we are required to put that your first program is English as a second language, and then your second program is your academic program, because we don't know your level of English proficiency. So we have to place you in a placement test first when you come. And if you test poorly, you will then therefore be put into an English as a second language program, because you did not provide us an English placement test. So it's really important to look on those requirements, and if your school requires it, to give it to you.
And again, this is to ensure you can succeed in the academic classroom, that you're not coming here spending your money in a situation that you're not going to be able to keep up with the lectures and things like that. It's to make sure you are succeeding as a student.
Yeah. And a lot of times, I mean, it goes hand in hand. I mean, like, domestic students have all of their undergraduate in all of English, and they take English composition classes, and they take the ACT. So this is just to prove that you're academically ready to be in the academic classes at the highest level, master level. And if you don't have that English proficiency, they can't accept you at that level. So this is what we're showing these requirements that you're able to succeed at that level.
Yeah. And is there any way that a student doesn't have to take an English proficiency exam?
Again, I would look at the requirement for the school. I know some schools, if you did go to a U.S. domestic university, they'll waive it if you've taken English 1101, 1102, because that is equivalent to the TOEFL or IELTS. But again, you have to look on those requirements for the school.
Yeah, like what I was thinking, you know, maybe if they attended undergrad in America or England, Australia, New Zealand, an English-speaking country, would that be possible?
Yeah, again, you just would have to look on the requirements, but going to a U.S. domestic school and taking English 1101 and 1102, just because you went to a U.S. domestic school for part of your university doesn't always equate it. You would have to take certain requirements for most of those schools to equate it. For the schools that I've experienced. Yeah, but look at the requirements at those schools that you're applying to, because everyone's different, and I can't speak to every school. Yeah.
So and this is kind of not on the question sheet I had, but English 1101, 1102 are just like your basic English classes for undergrad students in the United States.
Yeah.
So for example, let's say I was an undergrad student from Kazakhstan, and I actually got accepted. I'm doing online, right? Do I need to provide a TOEFL score for online as well?
For online classes, it's still the same admissions as in-person admissions. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Okay. Because I just thought like maybe there was another way around it, but
if anything, online classes are a little bit more rigorous than in-person classes because it's a lot more reading.
And I can speak to that as someone who's an instructor and has taught both online and in person. A lot of international students think, I'll take history online, it'll be so much easier, I'm not in a lecture. But because you don't have that lecture and open discussion with your professor and classmates, the professor has to put so much more material. There's more reading, there's more writing. So it is a rigorous program.
So I know for example, like at Troy, we can waive the requirement for ESL for on campus. We do not waive the requirement for ESL or for English proficiency test for online because we can't test for online for English proficiency. So we do have to have that requirement. So I know every school is different, but that's just an example of why it is required. It's hardcore, hard, fast rule that we have to have it for online.
Yeah. And we talked about being accepted without meeting like your English proficiency scores. But what if, for example, if your GRE, GMAT, MCAT scores aren't what they need to be, I guess, is it possible to be accepted then? Maybe be accepted as a conditional admissions or something along those lines?
Again, I would say go on to the website for the school that you're applying to, because every school and every specific program has different requirements. So if you're applying for computer science, they might have a conditional admissions, but if you're applying for the School of Accountancy, they might not. So because it's really based on the school, their requirements and their accreditation.
Right.
So because like I know, again, at Troy, that's what I'm most familiar with, and Jamie's familiar with where she's gone to school. Our light went out for a second, sorry. But our schools are accredited differently. Every college, every program underneath every university is accredited differently. And so why those program requirements are different is because they have different standards that they have to live up to. And so one can waive it. If you look on like online, if you're applying right now to different schools, you might say, oh, well, they've waived this for COVID. This GRE score is waived for COVID, but this one's not. That doesn't make sense. Every school should waive everything for COVID. It's realistically because different schools have different accreditation standards, and they might not legally, per that accreditation body, might not be able to waive something. So like our MBA program, our Master's of Business Administration, falls under our business school, the same as our accounting program. Our MBA program has waived the GRE for fall because of COVID. A lot of testing, a lot of countries, a lot of testing facilities are closed because of COVID. However, accounting, same school of business, but it has different accreditation. They legally, according to their accreditation standards, can't waive that because every student who goes through that program has to have a GRE. So they can't waive it, because if they do, they'll lose their accreditation. And then that degree that you get through that program won't mean anything.
And I would add that also with graduate programs, they're a little bit more competitive to get into. So you do see a lot less of, conditional acceptance into graduate programs because they have a ton of applicants and can only select a small group of those applicants. So they're probably going to pick the students who applied that, have everything to be admitted to their program.
So I would say if you see a school that's like, we waive this and we waive this and we waive this, I would question why they're waiving everything, because that might mean that their accreditation isn't as high as another school is, right. Which means that your degree isn't worth as much.
Yeah, the more rigorous the program, the more competitive, the less they're going to waive.
Yeah, exactly. So, and one thing I've talked about in my testing presentation, was paying attention to conditional, unconditional admissions, test blind policy, what your school has. But specifically, I know a lot of students I guess every international student wants to have some type of source of funding. It's hard to go to college without any. So you need to look at what maybe your the scholarship, it requires some type of score as well. So making sure you're just paying attention to all the little details.
Mm-hmm.
I guess to continue, we kind of talked about being an online student. A lot more students are doing it these days, and I think even in our international students, is it just kind of the same process, applying for an international student and applying online?
Yeah, because you're still an international student applying. The only difference would be that you wouldn't apply for a visa. The visa is only if you want to come to the States to study. And eventually, if you want to transition from an online to on-campus student, you can do that. Most schools will allow that as long as your program is offered both online and on campus. So it's the same process. The only difference is you won't be issued an I-20 and you don't have to go through the visa process.
Yeah, so that's where I was getting at. Maybe they can't get their visa interview in time. Maybe they could start off as an online student and transfer in. And one more thing too, I had to ask about being an online student. And as an online student, are you issued an I-20 as well?
You are not. And
Okay.
typically, if you're applying for online, you're not usually asked for, or not in my experience at Troy or any of the other schools that I've been talking to, that you won't be asked for your financials. They might ask you for your legal passport, whether it's expired or not, because they want to make sure your legal name matches your academic documents. So that way, whatever you're issued at that school, at Troy, at whatever school you're applying to, matches all of your other legal documents, because those are carried with you down your academic history. So they want to make sure you put your legal name in. I know a lot of students, when they apply, they might use nicknames and things like that. So we want to make sure you have your accurate name in. So they might ask you an ID, a passport or whatnot, but they won't ask you for your financial documents for online.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you don't really need to, I mean, you'll be staying in Kazakhstan, so you don't need to prove that you have so much money to
Or
study for
whatever
1
country you decide to go to, just not the United States.
Yeah, exactly. So, you know, in some cases, it might be better to do online, you know, maybe if you can't get your visa interview or just want to kind of delay coming to the United States, that might be an option for students as well. And this is kind of a question, you know, kind of specifically what Jamie deals with. So what kind of immigration standards do international students have to uphold and abide by at their institutions?
So you have to be registered full time, unless you have a very specific authorization with a very specific circumstance that you don't, or it's your last semester. Full time depends on universities or the program. Here at Troy, it's 12 credit hours for undergrad and 9 credit hours for graduate. As an F1, you can do 9 of those on campus and the other 3 online. If you're a graduate, 6 on campus, the other 3 online. Also, so you have to be registered full time. You have to be attending classes on campus. You cannot work off campus. That's part of upholding your immigration status while here, unless you went through the process to be authorized. So there's some options. I won't get into too much. You would need to talk to the International Student Services, your DSO, at what school you're in. But, you know, there are options for working off campus, but you cannot do that without authorization from your DSO at that school. That will result in termination of status and you'll be told to go home. I'm trying to think of other ones I'm overlooking.
Yeah.
I will say one thing students get caught up in when they come to the US is their visa. And my advice on the visa is, as long as you're staying in the US, that visa is really just your ticket through the door. You have to have it to get in, but once you're here, the end date you should be concerned with, as long as you're staying in the US and not traveling, is the end date on your I-20. That's why I said at the beginning, your I-20 is so important. It doesn't matter if your visa is good, which it shouldn't exceed your I-20, but it doesn't matter if it's good till 2024. If your I-20 was shortened, maybe you finished early and your DSO shortened your I-20 to say, you know, 2023, that's your end date. That's when you're no longer, you know, an F1 student in the US and you need to leave within 60 days.
Yeah, and just kind of a follow-up question. So let's say a student is working off campus and is told to go home. Does that hurt their chances of coming back in the future?
Yeah, tremendously, because you did not do what you were supposed to do while you were here. You're making an agreement with that visa that you will follow the US regulations and rules. And when you don't, it puts a flag on you for when you try to do anything else with the US or come back, that, hey, they're not going to do what they're supposed to do. And the same with students, you know, who get in situations where they're arrested, unfortunately. That's a major flag. You'll get sent home, and then you're probably not going to get to come back, because that's viewed as almost a homeland security issue. You're, you know, committing crimes in the US and not doing what even if it's something that most college students think is, you know, something you do when you're in college. But it's a big deal because you're in another country breaking the law.
Yeah. Very good information. So a big one, for international students is funding opportunities. Do you know, like, can you kind of go over, what kind of funding opportunities are available for international students? For example, like scholarships, graduate assistantships, workships. There's also like OPT, CPT, those things. Can you just kind of just go over like briefly what those are?
You want to hit on scholarships?
Yeah,
Pick up.
yeah. So we'll divide that up. So just depending on what school you go to, the scholarships will vary. So scholarships are based a lot of times on academics or depending on what they offer. So sometimes they offer academic scholarships, sometimes they offer foundation scholarships, which are really just based on, sometimes alumni will offer scholarships if you meet certain criteria. Businesses in the area will offer scholarships if you meet certain criteria, as well as if your country offers specific scholarships for you to study abroad. So I know in Kazakhstan, they offer the help me out, Mac. The Bolshevik Foundation Scholarship.
Yeah, from the federal government. The government.
From the federal government, and it's a fully funded scholarship, but you have to meet certain. Thank you so much. But you have to meet certain criteria, and so all of these scholarships, you just would have to meet certain criteria for that. So just depending on what school you're applying to, they'll have a scholarship page up at the top of their portal. You click on that and see which scholarships are available for you. Some are, like I said, admission based. So if you meet GPA, GRE score, English proficiency, you have to meet all of those requirements. They can offer that at the time of admissions. Some of them you have to apply for. If you meet the other additional eligibility, you have to write an essay. Again, look at the school that you're applying to, because every school offers different scholarship eligibility. I know at Troy, we offer a 50% off tuition scholarship if you meet the English proficiency, the GPA, which is a 2.5 usually for graduate students out of 4.0, as well as if your program requires a GRE, you meet the GRE score, which is it's a pretty hefty scholarship just for admission-based scholarships. And then your program also might offer graduate assistantships built into the program. Others you might have to apply to. So just depending on your eligibility, you can go to different job portals on your school's website and see which programs offer. So the thing is with graduate assistantships, depending on your school, you don't have to be in that program specifically to apply to the graduate assistantship. Like, for example, our graduate assistant is a sports management graduate student. Has nothing to do with international programs, but her background on her resume, on her CV, has experience that we were looking for. So if your resume is something that's specific to a program, they might look at that as addition to your academic history. So don't be limited if you're just applying to computer science, but you have a background in finance. They might be looking to, I know that's a weird combination. I just picked two things, right? So, but they might be looking for different things, or on campus, they might be offering different graduate assistants through the whole entire program. I know libraries offer graduate assistantships, art programs offer graduate assistants, but they don't have actual ones built into their program, but they have like museum managers and things like that. So you want to look at their whole job board, not ones that are just built into your program, because they might offer substantial funding and stipends. Some offer full scholarships, some offer monthly stipends. It just depends on your program. And Jamie can speak to that as well, because she actually was a graduate student and she received lots of money. So
yeah, I was paid to go to grad school.
Yeah.
So you can, end up where you're actually making money being in school. Because if you're working on campus, there's no limits for international students as far as that goes. And she mentioned the graduate assistantships, which she's right. You can look through the job portal, typically find positions that are open. And even if it's not in your program, if your skill set matches, you might be a candidate. So go ahead and apply. For teaching assistantships, which is what I did, typically you would look through the program you're applying to's page on the university website and see if they offer teaching assistantships. if they do, look at how you apply for that. Most of those positions, when you're writing your cover letter, you know, for admission and why you want to go to that school and who you want to work with, your research interests, you add, like mine, I added at the bottom, hey, I'm very interested in a teaching assistantship. Here's why, and here's why I think you should choose me. Now, I didn't spend much time on that. I only put a small paragraph, but I ended up being the only master's student in my program to have a full teaching assistantship. So, you know, address that that's something you want and you're interested in. And a lot of times, like Claire said, that included for me, all of my tuition and fees were paid. I got paid monthly extra for that position. And all I did was I went and I graded for the professor, and then once a week I led a discussion section. It wasn't a lot of work because they know you're there to be a student, but it also helps you later on. You know, I had teaching experience before I even had my master's. So that's how I became an instructor at Troy. Other opportunities, you can possibly find student worker positions. I would kind of cautiously say, I think most of those at universities are for undergraduate. But it is per university, so look and see what's available. And some of those student worker positions are federal funded, so they're only available for domestic, so U.S. citizens. Other options, Mac, you mentioned OPT and CPT. These are the two options that I didn't go into earlier where you can work off campus. Both OPT has to be authorized by USCIS, so it takes up to 5 months, sometimes longer, especially with COVID, to be approved. And then CPT will be approved by your DSO and international programs. So that one's pretty quick. Both of these have to be related to your degree. If you're doing these while you're a student, you have to remain full-time. While you're in school for pre-completion OPT, meaning before you graduate, you can't be full-time except for on annual breaks, so summer, winter break if they're open then. But again, these have to be related to your degree, and CPT has to be integral to your course of study, meaning there has to be a class in your program that counts towards your degree. You're required to take it, and it requires an internship. That gets a lot more difficult with graduate programs because most of them don't require internships at that point. That's kind of an undergraduate thing to gain experience to get into graduate programs. But it's happened. There's ways to do it. So my advice for CPT, if you're interested in doing something like that, is to really, really communicate with your academic advisor, a professor in your program, and the international office. And most of the time, there's ways to make it work. But again, harder once you're in grad school.
Exactly. And another, and I guess undergraduate students could also watch this session as well when it's posted on the YouTube page. And there might be some in it already. But as OPT and CPT, do you have to be enrolled in your university for a year before you begin?
Yeah.
You know, you can't just start. Okay.
Right. So you can't just start. So don't think, hey, I'm going to come to this university and then I'm going to apply for these things and immediately do them. You have to have been in F1 status at your university for at least a year before starting that. Now, there's wiggle room with that. I guess that's a weird phrase. But anyways, if you complete that program and then you transfer to a new university, if they offer day one CPT, that's an option. I would question a program that offers day one CPT. Most of them aren't up to standards, and they're kind of looked at. The government kind of looks at you going there questioning, because it kind of looks like you're just here to work, not to study, which is what your visa is for. It's a student visa, not a work visa. But yeah, undergraduate students for sure, there's a ton of flexibility. Also keep in mind, OPTs by USCIS, the guidelines are very firm. This is what you do. CPT, since it's approved by your international office, it's per university. Some universities don't even offer CPT. They don't want to deal with it because it's a very gray area. It's a lot of the university choosing how they interpret those regulations. So they don't have to offer you CPT. So that's another thing to look at. If that's something you're interested in, make sure that you're looking if your university offers that.
Exactly. And it's something, just as a recruiting pitch, I mean, these programs can give you, you're here studying, but also give you the practical training
Right.
that you need to help you when you go back home to get a job. I'm sure it'll look really good on your CV resume as well.
Exactly. And unfortunately, it is a little bit tougher because you can't just accept an internship like domestic students can without that authorization and meeting those guidelines. So if you're, again, wanting to intern and get that experience before you go home, which does look really great, make sure you're going to a school where that's a possibility.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that's something to look at. If your university does offer these options as well. Something I just want to handle is make sure looking at accreditations for your university. Is the school accredited, like the university, but also the specific program, because that matters a lot. It matters quite a bit. So looking at those things when you're just trying to find schools to possibly go to.
Right.
So we mentioned, financial funding your studies abroad. That's a large issue. We see that every day, those type of issues. What other issues do you often see that international students have that you would tell prospective students to kind of watch out for, to make sure they take precautions to avoid them?
I mean, to clarify, like when they get here,
or when looking for a school?
When they get here, but also things they could do beforehand to prevent maybe issues occurring when they get here.
So when looking for a school, I would do, like I said before, do your research. I mean, so if you Max, if you're looking for a school that offers OPT, CPT, I mean, do your research, ask questions. Like Jamie said, when you're writing your letter to put forth on your cover letter, I mean, you're gonna tip most schools for graduate schools, you're gonna have to write some sort of statement of purpose or cover letter explaining of why you want to go to that program. And you're gonna have to do research of understanding of what professor you want to study under, because that's normally a question. Why did you choose this school, and what professor do you want to study? Which happens to coincide with one of those visa questions, right? So
and it also helps to mention, like I did, I found the books they had published, and so I would say, this book matches my research interests. He wrote this matches my interest, and I think we can work together.
So you're not just haphazardly choosing a school because, it's high ranked, right? Like, I want to go to Princeton because it's number one. I actually don't know their ranking. It's like high up there, but I don't know if it's number one anymore, right? So maybe top 10, right? So either which way, you don't just want to choose it on rank. You want to make sure it fits you and your needs and what you want to do, right? So maybe the best thing for you to do is make a timeline of your future and decide what is best for you, and see if that school is going to help reach your goals. Because that's going to really realistically help you write that statement of purpose and answer those questions in the visa interview, and then understand how that school is going to help you reach those goals, and how that program, and how maybe one of those professors in that program, and if that school is not going to help you reach that goal, then find a different school. And then maybe even down to the minute things of like, this school is in North Alaska. I don't like the cold. Well, don't go to that school because it's going to snow a lot. And I know that you're used to that in parts of Kazakhstan, but if you don't like that in your own country, maybe choose a school in like Florida, right? Because this is your time for you to choose that, right? So
get an experience. For sure.
Yeah, so this is your time to choose little things, because the school, also the cultural experience, you're coming to the United States, that's going to affect how you learn outside of the classroom as well, right? Because coming to the United States is not just about learning, it's also the cultural experience. And so you're choosing the school based off of the academics, but also your cultural experience that you're coming for. So make sure that you know why you're coming for your future, but also what you're going to learn outside of that classroom.
And to build on what she's saying about culture, as working in student services for international students and also teaching in the classroom, a lot that I see international students struggle with is culture shock, particularly with how the U.S. academic system works, so the classroom. So I would say, you know, research, get online. There's lectures posted online everywhere of how an American classroom works. I think a lot of our Ivy League schools are doing free classes that you can sign up for, and that just kind of gets you prepared for the classroom when you get here, because there's only so much. Professors want to help, they do, but especially at really large schools, when they have 250 students in one classroom, it's really hard for them to take time and say, I understand you're not used to the system and things like that, which is one of the benefits to go into a smaller school. They do have time, but and also getting aware of US plagiarism standards. Plagiarism is not the same all over the world, or what is considered plagiarism. So when you get to the US, some professors will be understanding and say, I understand you just got here. Others will say, well, you were accepted to a US school, you need to know the classroom standards the same as the other students in here. So it just really depends, and I would advise research that. What does plagiarism mean in the US? Is it the same as your country? If it is, great, that's easy for you. If it's not, study that, figure it out. That way you're not playing catch up when you've already started the class.
I know this is a silly example, but I see that there's some girls in here, and I'll try to make an example for the guys, but we tell you guys, I mean, I know we've said this many times in this webinar, but do your research. And I know I'm assuming this because I see a couple of you guys and your cute little pictures, but I do my research on little minute things like makeup and face care and hair products. And I will research that product for like maybe an hour or 2 hours before I even buy it. So that product might be like $20. So this is your education that's going to be like thousands of dollars and affect your whole entire life, right? And guys, I'm sure that you research like computers and things like that, which is way more expensive than they. But what I'm saying is, it affects your whole entire life. So you need to invest some time and effort into researching these things, because one decision of you coming to the United States, because it is not just like a minuscule thing that you're thinking, oh, I'm just going to go study in the United States, it's going to be awesome, I'm going to learn all about American culture. It is your whole entire lives that's really changing from you coming here, because you're learning new perspectives, you're learning a new way of thinking, because you're coming to learning the American point of view, right? And we're not going to push that on you, but realistically, you're coming here to learn the way that we think, the way that Americans learn in the classroom. It changes anytime you study abroad. Like I lived abroad for my whole entire adult life for 11 years, and it completely changed my perspective. Okay. So, and I didn't just go into that thinking, I'm going to move to Cambodia. Like, I did not think it was not a brash decision. I had to put time and effort to thinking that. I had to think, why do I want to move to Cambodia? How is this going to affect my life? What am I going to do there? You have to put time and effort into thinking about that. So you need to research these schools and understand why you want to go there. And realistically, that's going to show in your visa interview. Because if you go in there and think, I don't know why I want to go there, I don't know why, I mean, the visa officer is going to deny you. But if you put time and effort into the school and understand why you want to go there, you can explain that to the visa officer.
Yeah, I've had meetings, and so has Claire, with these officers, and one story that stuck out to me that was really funny. He's like, yeah, it was an instant denial. The student didn't know, and their reason for why they wanted to come to the US to study was, well, I watched American movies and American college looks fine, I want that experience. That's not going to get you a visa.
Right.
Yeah.
It's great, it's not going to get you a visa.
So that's my soapbox. I'll send it out.
And then, you know, Jamie and Claire kind of took the words out of my mouth when they said, you know, that research is going to help you write your statement of purpose, you know, for your graduate program, and not research on like Princeton is a top 10 university. You don't really necessarily want to include that in your statement of purpose, but include like the professors, their publications, what stands out about like certain classes about the program, things like that. So that research is going to show up, is going to help you in your visa interview and writing your, you know, statement of purpose, personal statement, right?
It'll help you get accepted into the program, and you're more likely to get funding, because look, I would have loved to go to Harvard, it's an Ivy League school, that degree looks amazing. There's no one at Harvard who does anything that I'm interested in. Yeah, they have a history program, but none of it's the research I do, and it's not even related. So just because it's a good school doesn't mean it's a good fit for you.
Right.
And you're not, even if you go to that school and it's not a good fit, that degree is really not going to be as valuable, even if it does come from a place like Harvard or Princeton, because you didn't learn as much from it.
And you wasted a lot of money.
And you wasted a lot of money.
Yeah,
I think
mhm,
there's a
exactly.
question here about unconditional admissions and how it relates to getting full funding. Just to bounce back off of what we've all been saying is when you try to get unconditional admissions, you basically, again, go to that admission page and see all of those requirements. If you meet those requirements and you submit an application with all of those requirements, that's how you get unconditional admissions. If you met all of those requirements, that's basically how you get unconditional admissions. Right?
Mhm.
I mean, that's how you do it. And then you go through that BOLSHAC program.
And again, a conditional admission for a graduate program, I would think is a little rare.
Yeah, they're typically not going to give you conditional admission. They're just going to deny you.
Right.
And typically the denial is not just because you didn't meet the requirements. I'll tell you my story because it's a really good story. I met every one of my requirements to get in grad school. I applied to Emory University, which is a really good school in the South. They have really good medical programs. I wanted to go for neuropsychology, and I had the highest GPA at Troy, and I did really, really well and did good on my GREs. And I was a great student, had great letters of recommendation. They only accept 2 students into this program. So getting a denial, yeah, Mac, you're laughing at me. Thank you. Getting a denial does not mean that you are necessarily not meeting the requirements. It's because they don't necessarily have room in their program. And so that's also really important to look at when you're doing your research. How selective are they, and see how many people they can get into their program, because their programs sometimes are limited on how many people they can have in their cohort at one time.
Right. And I had the kind of same situation Claire had. I applied to 3 graduate programs. 2 accepted me full funding, were paying me to be there, gave me a job up front. The one I wanted was more selective, and yeah, I met their requirements, but they denied me. And again, it's not necessarily you're not good enough. They're having to do these fine line things. And it may be that a professor really was interested in this person's research, and it will help them write their book to work with them. And so they want that person, things like that.
So also, yeah, do your research.
Yeah,
understand how
research.
many people can be in that program. So, and always have a backup, because I didn't have a backup like me.
Yeah. And a specific question I had from a student, I talked to you, Claire, a little bit earlier about was, if someone is applying for an immigrant visa in the summer, should she apply at that time, or can she apply with current international student status and be able to apply for funding? And I kind of talked to you about this question earlier. Can you kind of elaborate on that?
Yeah, so this is a kind of complex situation, and if you're here in the webinar, you might want to clarify this, because if you're applying for immigrant status, I'm assuming immigrant status would mean you're coming to the United States to immigrate and maybe be on a green card. And so that would change your status of not being an F1 student on a student visa. And so that changes the whole dynamic here. But you wouldn't apply for a student visa if you're trying to get a green card, because you won't get a student visa if you're trying to get a green card, because keep in mind, a student visa is a non-immigrant status. If you go in, and I think we discussed this already, if you go into the visa interview and you say you want to immigrate, they're going to deny you. Again, at this time, the United States government, if you say anything about coming in and wanting to stay in the United States and immigrate, denial eventually hopefully they'll change it to dual intent under this administration, and which means that you can say, I want to study and then eventually get my green card status, but they are not.
I wouldn't think you would get a green card right off the bat.
Again, do not mention any of that in your visa interview. And this is not me advising. Legally, I can't advise you to do that. Okay. You can't mention anything about wanting your green card in a visa interview. In a student visa interview, you can't mention any of that because they will deny you. Eventually, like I said, under the Biden administration, they want to change it so that it can be dual intent, but it's not changed at this time. So they will deny you if you say you want to get your green card. If you are in the process already of getting your green card, you don't apply for a student visa. And that's a whole different thing. And you probably will want to talk to your visa lawyer, immigration lawyer. That's it, immigration lawyer, because they will help to advise you with that, because there's different standings with that.
Okay.
Yes, I figured you would be. Okay, please talk to your immigration lawyer, because that changes everything. And you wouldn't apply as an international student if you are in the process to get your green card. You would apply as a domestic student, and that changes the whole gambit of things.
But on your question of opportunity, I would say they're equal. They're not gonna say, oh, you're an international student, you don't get the funding. The only difference is U.S. citizens can apply for federal loans that we have to pay back and pay a lot of interest on.
Yeah.
But as far as actual funding, like scholarships, assistantships, things like that, that has nothing to do with if you're a U.S. citizen or not.
And you probably can't apply for that Bolshevik thing because that's for Kazakh people, right? So unless you have dual citizenship. So I would again talk to your immigration lawyer about that, and then talk to the school and just make sure you let your school know your situation, because I've had students come to me and say that they're international students, and then after we've admitted them and issued them their I-20, they've come back and said, oh, I'm just kidding, I'm on an A2 visa, which changes the whole dynamic of things.
If you're not on an F1 visa, if you're going to school on any other visa, for admission purposes, for requirements while you're here, you're not an international student, even if you come from another country. You're at that point considered domestic, and you do everything through them.
Yeah. And just kind of to begin, I guess, kind of to wrap up, can you make sure, you said there was a website students can visit to see what information they need for
Yes,
their visa interview?
I think it was posted.
And also they could
I'll
probably,
post it again. I'll post a few websites. Copy.
and probably online as well, you can kind of find out more information about, what OPT is, what CPT is. And I posted some scholarship websites international students can use to search for scholarships, because there's scholarships. And these websites were quite, not all of them are so trustworthy, but there's some websites that can use. So there's third-party scholarships from the university, and so on.
And I would warn, when you're looking for information regarding OPT, CPT, make sure you're using a U.S. government website. Don't go, I have students all the time and they're like, well, I went to this website or I'm on this Facebook page and they say this. That's not what the government says. Just because you find the answer you want doesn't mean it's the actual answer. So make sure you're always using those actual government official websites like Study in the States, what Claire is posting. Those are always good ones to go to.
Yeah, and I was going to mention also, there is I guess a company called Argo. I don't know if you remember this, Jamie, that they can help you also with kind of what to do, the visa interview process.
Right.
And they have social media platforms. Like I actually follow them on Instagram, and they're very helpful. They'll have talks with visa officers, the DSOs of universities, and they just kind of talk about the visa process and so on. And I'll type in the name in the chat. Argo, ARGO, I believe. And they're on social media. I follow them on Instagram, and they'll have live videos with like DSOs, visa officers.
Sorry.
Yeah, does any of the participants have any other questions that they would like to ask our guest today?
Oh, somehow I keep direct messaging these things. I'm so sorry, guys.
Yeah, I know it can be quite confusing.
I know.
Yeah, if there aren't any more questions, I would just kind of like to go over, thank everyone for being here. Yeah, and okay, yeah. So I guess as Adelia, I'm sorry I can't pronounce the name, but you can ask your question through the microphone.
Do we need to?
And I don't know if you're still yeah, if you're muted. Is it okay if she asks her question through the microphone, Rashawn?
Yeah, sure. Let me just see. Now they can unmute themselves.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Enjoyed it. I just have several questions. I know that in America you can apply to PhD without getting like master's graduate studies. So I just wanted like a little more information on that, because right now I'm getting my undergraduate in Italy and on like humanities studies. And I was thinking if I can apply directly to PhD studies in America without getting my master's first, or I'll have to get master's anyway.
It depends on the program. So what your field is, what you're going into, it also depends on the school. If you have great credentials, you've done really, really well, it's a really good school in Italy, and the program says you can skip masters, then yeah, that can be an option.
And sometimes they're a pathway program.
Right.
So you get your master's while getting your PhD. You're not just directly getting your PhD, you're getting your master's while on the path to get your PhD. And they'll explain that on their mission page. So if you apply directly to a PhD program and they haven't explained it's a pathway program, they might not admit you because you don't meet those requirements. So if they say you have to have a bachelor's and a master's, then they're not going to admit you because you don't meet those requirements. But if they explain that it's the pathway program or it's master's optional, then it's possible.
Without like getting the information, like you can get your PhD without your master's, I was like, how? So it's more clear now. And how would you say that, how many like papers or like research papers you would have to, I would have to post during my undergraduate to increase my chances getting into graduate studies?
So it depends on the program. If you're writing a paper, if you need a writing sample for your application, speaking to just writing essays to look better, none of those essays are going to go on your resume unless you present them at a conference. So the number doesn't really matter unless you're getting accepted to conferences and presenting them, then that looks great. I had some of those, but the ones you're just writing for class wouldn't. It helps your writing skill. It helps you get a stronger, essay sample to give them. But really that sample you're submitting in your application is going to be what they look at, along with, like I mentioned, presenting papers at conferences on your resume or CV.
Thinking maybe if they look at how many paper, that I'll post during undergraduate and like how it might affect my like chances to get into graduate. But yeah, now it's more clear.
I mean, if any of those get published,
right,
and you become a published at the undergraduate level. I mean, we'll definitely look at that. Or if you co-write any of that with any of your professors, that can go on your CV as well. Which is great. If you end up doing research with any of your professors and you end up getting a co-author title, that would be awesome. That looks really good.
Have to be like published on a specific some kind of platform, or like is there like, I don't know, magazines? Like I'm not like interested in just in sake of getting like, you know, graduate, but it's just like more because right now I'm starting to do some researches, and I would love to be like everything on the like professional side.
It has to be peer reviewed publications, meaning it's went through review by other people who are, you know, doctors in that field and things like that, and been selected to be published. You can't just say, this is a crazy example, but I posted this on my blog. It's published on the internet on my blog. Like that wouldn't, but you know, if your school has a school journal, my undergrad program, we had a student journal. I put that in my CV and resume that my article was selected to be in that student journal. It's not, you know, what people with PhDs are publishing in, but it's still something that was reviewed and you were selected and you had to go through an editing process to have that published.
And the peer review process can take a while if it's at a high journal level, but if you're like Jamie says, if your school has one, that doesn't take as long. So if you are peer reviewed at the undergraduate level, that would be very, very good.
Yeah, and I think the admissions committee is not expecting you to know everything and to have done everything at this point in your career.
And that's a great point, Mac. They want to see what you know, but they also want to see that you want to learn more and why their school and program's a good fit for you to learn more at. So you want to,
potential.
You want to address, hey, this is what I've been doing. I've hit, I can't go further, and that's why I'm selecting this school where I can learn more about this section and research more into this.
And that's really why that timeline I was talking about is crucial, is because you need to pinpoint on that timeline of why that school will help you get to your future. And if you can explain to the school of like, this is my future goal, but I need you to help me to get there. And if you can explain that to that school, again, that helps in your visa interview, but if you can explain to the school in your statement of purpose, like, this is my goal, but I need you and your professors to get me there. Like that basically runs it home to them.
This might kind of let you or help you relax on the paper thing. When I applied for my graduate programs, I applied with the very first paper I had ever written that was a formal research history paper. The very first paper, and I got full funding at 2 universities, and I hadn't written any other papers at that point. It was my last semester that I did a bunch of conferences and things like that. So, they didn't look at me and say, maybe they did, but they liked it. So it was fine. And that was the only paper at that point that I had written. So they're not expecting you to be perfect when you apply.
Exactly. It sounds like Claire should give a presentation on brainstorming for statement of purposes for graduate school. Because that's pretty much what that's exactly what I've talked about in my presentations. Are there any other questions?
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, go ahead.
Hi guys, hi lady. Thank you so much for the information you provided us. It was very informative, and then you look very enthusiastic about helping us, and thank you so much for that again. I have a question about this visa. So you told us that if I want to get accepted, if I want to get my visa accepted, I should say like I am planning to get my graduate degree and come back to Kazakhstan and like work here. But what if what if I graduate from my university and accepted a job, for example, in the US? If I'm offered the job, would I be penalized for lying and like being deported back to Kazakhstan?
No, because when you came, your intent was to go home. And then when you got here, and F1 students get a year of OPT if for any degree. So a year after they graduate that they're allowed to work. You apply to get this and you get approved, you get a year. If you're a STEM degree, you get 3 years you can work. And in that, you might have a great job and they love you and they say, you're a wonderful employee. We want to sponsor you for the H-1B.
Which is awesome.
Which is
So it
great.
wouldn't affect my visa history, right? Like they wouldn't
No,
say, so
no,
Sima,
you've done
you
everything.
told that you would come back, but now you're not.
No, because it's non-immigrant intent. So your intention was not
I
to
just
say
don't want to
your
be a liar
intention-
and I have a negative history of my
No,
visa.
because you don't know what the future holds, right?
When
Yeah, right.
I have students tell me they got an H-1B and they're no longer in F1 status, I celebrate with them. It is so great. And that's not ever going to reflect badly on you because you did it the right way. You didn't just come here on an F1 visa and then disappear and stay. That would be where but when you're doing things the proper way, you got your approval to work through OPT on your F1, and then your employer applies for your H-1B and you get that, and then eventually you get your green card. You've done everything the correct steps. That will never negatively impact you.
Thank you so much, ladies. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, great question.
But you don't want to say in the visa interview, your goal is an H-1B.
Of course.
Do we have any other questions? No. If that's everything, I'm gonna post my email on the chat again, and feel free to contact me if you have any questions about either previous presentations we've done. This one, if you have any questions for Claire or Jamie, they work just right down the hall from me, so they're very easy for me to get in contact with. I just want to say thank you everyone for being here today, taking times out of your work day, your evening to come here. And just to go over a few things, make sure you're doing your research during the process. The most prepared student, most well-informed student is probably the most successful student once they get into graduate school. Yep, if that is everything, sadly, this is my last currently scheduled presentation, but hopefully I'll be doing more in the future, and maybe we can also have Claire and Jamie come and sit in on some of our presentations and add such their valuable input as well. So Rashawn, if you would like me to sign off, just let me know, or if you want to.
Yeah, just thank you so much for doing this. And this week I'm going to write, we do this weekly activity report that goes to the US State Department. So I'm gonna write a really good report, and hopefully maybe we can try to make some other events, especially with graduate students and international office, because I learned lots of information, even though I've been in this position for about 5 years. But it's always good to have some knowledgeable guest speakers. Thank you a lot for your time.
Thank you so much for having us. This was so much fun. We enjoyed speaking to all of you guys.
Yeah, it was fun.
Have a good night, everyone, and I'll see you, Jamie and Claire, in just a couple minutes.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you guys so much.
All right. Bye-bye, everyone.